Welcome everyone. This interview is the beginning. It is one in a series with Ken Clearwater and Todd Portsmouth, and we're discussing male survivors and ways in which we can encourage them to step forward. What we're needing from you, wonderful audience, is for you to please comment as you're watching these interviews. Please make comments, please ask questions so that in 4 weeks' time when we come back on air, we can look at what you've commented on and possibly provide some ideas and solutions around them. Thank you. Enjoy the interview. Hey everyone, welcome to Handing the Shame Back, the channel dedicated to survivors of child sexual abuse here in New Zealand and out across the world. And as with every show, if you feel triggered at all, please switch off, go to the show notes below where you'll be guided to support and resource that may help. If you are going to stay on the show, you'll be thrilled that you did, because we have today Todd Portsmouth, who was my very first guest, actually, Todd. And on the show back in January. And we also have Ken Clearwater, a legend in New Zealand for his work in supporting survivors throughout Aotearoa. So welcome to both of you, and great to have you here. And I guess the objective today, guys, is to kind of see what's going on within our climate in terms of our beautiful male survivors out there who there seems to be a wall of silence emanating, and I don't know how to help that. So I guess I'm reaching out to you guys and just wondering what your thinking is.
I suppose for me, when I first started back in 1996, and I would go and speak about male victims, nobody within the rooms or with the agencies or with it wanted to even hear about male survivors as victims, because we're predominantly perpetrators or seen as perpetrators. And so to come into a field of victimization just wasn't what people wanted to hear. But it also sits within the male psyche that we can't be seen as victims because it doesn't suit us well in a patriarchal society, and that's why we don't come out and speak. And so one of the things I found myself in the first few years was really the shame that went with it, and the guilt of were you responsible? Did I have something to do with it? Yes, women and girls are victims, but we aren't. And so there's a whole lot of that goes with it. And then when you do open up, it's like, how do you get treated when you open up? And oh, it's not as bad for you guys as it is for women, and things like that. And we're just expected to get over it. So there's a whole lot of things within our culture that doesn't allow us to come forward and speak. And then you've got people who are also working with survivors who you'll say, would you like to come on and do it? And they say, oh no, I don't want to put them through it. And so there's also that little bit of doubt in the survivor's mind that that if my counsellor or my therapist or so doesn't want me to do it, then I'm probably not a good idea to do it. And so that's, to me, is one of the most difficult things that we have. And then when a survivor does come forward and speak about it, it's ensuring that they've got the right supports around them when they do that, because as you know, we get triggered on a regular basis, and we go into that place where, oh, I probably should have shut my mouth, or why did I say that? And so there's a whole lot of things that go with it. But for me personally, I think it's the most powerful thing that we can do is to stand up and say, hey, it doesn't belong to me, and so I'm not carrying that. And so it's being able to encourage others men to come forward and disclose. So yeah, just a wee bit of a nutshell, really.
Oh, well, shall we sign off now then?
Oh, look, I agree with a lot of what you're saying there, Ken, and I think the big part that comes through is in how much healing I've done as to whether they're prepared to, and I guess for some of us it's different around how you process it. Like a lot of survivors, they deal with a lot of mental health issues and stuff too that come with that. Like they've turned to addictions, be it alcohol or drugs. Even some have sex addiction and stuff like that. That plays a part too. And I think you've got to go really careful that you don't put people into little baskets, I suppose. And guys in general find it harder to talk. We know the statistics is that there's a lot more guys out there that have been abused than what statistics say there are, because generally guys don't open up and talk about it. So it's not what that true figure is, and a lot don't take it anywhere either. Like they open up and see, but they might not actually listen stuff either. So I think at the end of the abuse that you're not alone. It's definitely not weak to speak up about it and share how that journey's been and the feelings and the processes that you've gone through. Because for me, for myself, that process has been the biggest healing process I've ever done, and it's been the best thing for me, because coming out the other side of it, I get the best version of me now. I used to take the guilt and the shame of it all and have that on my shoulders, and now I know that as a kid there was nothing I could have done that could have stopped any of that, and I couldn't change it. You know, I couldn't do anything about it. But you know what I can do is I can change the outcome for so many other guys out there to know that they're not alone. They don't have to suffer in silence for 36 years like I did. Yeah.
And it is that it is a process. I mean, I know that over the years we've done a lot of documentaries and a lot of programs and a lot of interviews with guys who have got, especially the guys who went through the Catholic Church and the state institution, where right back, I think probably 2002, 2004, and these are men who had predominantly spent their time right through as from children being locked up right through to adulthood into prisons. And so we would sit with them after the court sessions, and the reporters always wanted to interview them. And so we would sit with them and say, hey, this is an opportunity. If you want to speak out, it's entirely up to you. But knowing that if you do that, it will give someone else that opportunity to speak up as well. And that's the thing that I found. With survivors, there seems to be something in us that if we know we can help someone else, it gives us another added strength. And not knowing that our own journeys are helping them, but it can encourage them to open up, and then that encourages others. And I found that nearly all the men I've worked with over the years have said, I don't want anyone else to go through what I've gone through. And I'd say to them, well, if you want to share your story, that could be a way to help. So, and then there's some that have gone and done interviews and things like that. And it's really, it hasn't helped them personally, because for some reason they've isolated themselves away. So it's a fine balance to get that, to allow the guys to come forward and speak.
It's interesting you raise that point, actually, Ken, because I know on this show, and I've just had the 50th episode.
Sweet.
Is that, thank you, Todd, thanks, Ken, is that the most views were with the two of you.
Oh, really?
So
wow.
what that shows me, guys, is that it may be women watching, but I have a feeling a lot of men are watching those interviews. And that's why I'm really wanting to help our beautiful male survivors here, because I believe there's a huge need. I agree with you, Todd. I think the numbers are way bigger than potentially reported, because no one's reporting. It's very hard to gauge. But I guess if it helps one person by hearing your story, isn't that powerful?
Well, I think for me, Gloria, one of the things that like especially when I've sat down with government and that over the years, is I would love to see a national campaign, you know, where it's out there in the open, where you've got men like Todd and myself and other men who have come forward in their journeys and stand there, and it's there for people to see. You know, we need more. We need more interviews on national television. We need more stories out there. But unfortunately, the only time that they want to hear our voices, the likes of, if there's something like the church or the Catholic Church or the state stuff, and then they'll come in and they'll interview you, and you'll get a little thing, and then it's dropped. So it's about a follow-up. I think it needs to be. I honestly believe it should be something in the paper every day about the sexual abuse in this country. And until that really happens, it still stops a lot of men coming forward and disclosing and talking publicly. I mean, it's not easy.
No. Todd, were you going to say something? I think you've frozen a bit.
I think
here.
you're bang on. Here on the farm. I assume you can hear me now? Yeah. So you might not know this, Gloria, but I first met Ken back in 2015. And that was actually when I was going through everything poured out. Ken actually sat there having a cup of coffee with me, and there was a lot pouring out to Ken. And I guess I get emotional talking about this even, but having a bloke there that has actually been through something similar made that process a hell of a lot easier. And if you don't know Ken, he's a small man, but I tell you what, he's got a powerful punch as a boxer, don't you, Ken? But he's a man that is actually he's actually a very clever boxer, as Ken. But he's a man that you just feel at ease with. He's not. So for me, I don't trust stop, but Ken is just someone who comes across as a genuine guy that is just willing to listen. And I guess, to be fair, when you're wanting to share your story, you actually want someone to listen. You don't want someone who's going to yabber away a whole heap of crap that doesn't mean anything to you. You just want to get your story out. And Ken, you for me helped open that door and got me talking to people that I'd never done before in my life. And but I did that mainly alone, to be fair, right through. But I had an innate driven drive inside me. I had to do that for my kids. I had to do it for me. And at that point in time, I didn't think I was ever going to get to see my kids again. I thought I'd lost everything. Now I have all my kids. Life is completely turned around, and I'm surrounded by supportive people who are actually really pro sharing my story and advocating for this side. Like, it's a dirty little subject that we dare to talk about sometimes. I think that's how the public view it, instead of actually looking and going, this happened to my brother, or this happened to my father, or this happened to my mate. You know, that's the reality. It's happened to people's nephews, and some families struggle with it. They absolutely do. There are certain members in my own family who struggled with it because it calls into account their accountability of how come they didn't notice, how come they didn't do anything. And then when it comes out and they're like, oh, I remember that, and they didn't do anything. So you get that side too, but I think at the end of the day, I think it's just the more we talk about it, the more we normalise the fact that this is real, and this has happened to our males, it happens to our women.
Yeah.
Let's, as a society, get them behind these people and lift them up.
Yeah.
And, you know, look, we do all this sex ed and stuff and young people, and everyone's willing for that to happen. Why aren't they willing to deal with the effects of what had gone on in past history? And it still happens today, and it shouldn't.
Yeah. And I think you're right. You're right, Todd. I totally agree with what you're saying. And I think there's a couple of reasons potentially for the silence. So one is that good people, and I believe most people are good or have good in them, don't want to believe this happens. It's not that they don't believe you or me or Ken. It's that they don't want to believe it, because there goes the myth that we're living in a safe, beautiful country. So I think there's a little bit of that. And then for our wonderful survivors of We Are Three, the shame, as Ken said earlier, I think the shame just cripples the voice.
There's a lot of fear goes with it too, Gloria, and I don't know what the fear is, but I know that I've only ever been allowed to speak at 2 schools, and I only got in there because I knew the principal of one and the counsellor at another, and it was Shirley Boys High and Rangiora High, and even then there were certain people that didn't think I should have been there talking about this stuff. And yet the women's agency who I did it in conjunction with, there was no problem having women from Rape Crisis or Sexual Abuse Centre to talk on behalf of girls and women. But when it came to me talking about men and boys, that was a whole new ball game, and so there was a fear there. And then there's the other side of it too, is what happens if we go along and talk about this stuff and all of a sudden 100 boys come forward? What are we going to do? We've got no services. You're going to re-traumatize all these people and things like that. So it's about looking at what services have we got, how do we deliver those services. But what I found is you don't get 100 people come forward. But what you do is you plant the seed that there's a place if those people want to come forward. And I've noticed over time that we've had calls and people say, yeah, I'm ready to talk now. As Todd knows, there's a certain time when we're ready to talk. And as long as a person's there that believes us. And I remember the first day we met, Todd, good cup of tea. It wasn't a bad day either, but I got lost trying to find the farm in the middle of nowhere. And I just remember you were in you didn't want to be here, but at the same time you wanted to be here for your kids, and that was a real difficult time for you. So for me now to see where you're at is amazing, and it just goes to show that with the right support and being able to do the right thing, we can get there, and that's what we've got to encourage our guys to do, and especially our young guys, if we can get them at an early age, so that their lives don't have to be messed up as much as our lives were.
No, absolutely right. Well, look, I mean, it's something that I care deeply about. Like I like you both of you understand the pain that this journey causes, and the trauma we go through, and some of that trauma is left with us for the rest of our lives. You don't ever get past some of that. But what you do is you learn tools of how to manage that, so you're not triggered all the time, or it doesn't spiral you downwards. And that's the thing, I suppose, is the more we talk about it, it encourages others to speak out.
That's what I'm hoping, and that's partly why the channel I set up, Handing the Shame Back, because every time we talk like we are now, hopefully we're going to get a lot of views on this, and it just might give permission for one male to come forward and say, hey, look, it happened to me, and where to from here? Because I think one thing that was raised, and it was raised in my interview with when I interviewed Louise Nicholas, and again recently with another female survivor, but you guys will relate, is that depending on the age you were, even thinking about it or being triggered by it takes you straight back to being the child. So when you talk about fear earlier, Ken, I believe we go straight back to being that child. We feel powerless. We're in a position where we've got no control over any of it. And that's what the being triggered and kind of dissociation causes. So I just want to put that there, because when our survivors out there watching this see how powerful the silence is, I just wonder aloud with you guys whether it's possible that when they think about it, they're being transported straight back into that child that suffered it, and that's where the fear is.
And when you're in that place too, all of a sudden, especially if you've got a lot of stuff going on for you, and you go back to that place, and then you try and work out how to get out of it, and you're using that little person's brain rather than an adult's brain to try and get out. And so there's that, I'm worthless and I'm useless, and maybe it happened to me because I deserved it to happen to me. And you get into such a horrible place, and it's about being able to have those, like Todd talked about, tools. It's about sitting in that place and thinking, hold on a minute, I'm not useless, I'm not worthless, look where I am, look what I've achieved, what I've done. And it's been, and that self-talk is gets us into that place, but it can also get us out, and we've got to acknowledge that. And I think the difficult thing is for a lot of people is that's why people talk about, I don't know, if you bring it up, you'll get re-traumatized and things like that. But unfortunately, I think and I believe that we can only deal with this stuff by acknowledging and accepting the trauma that happened to us. We can't change that. That's happened, and we have to accept and acknowledge that happened, but it's not happening to us now. And it's about how do we accept and acknowledge that it's not happening to us now? What have I got within me that I can work through this? And that's the most difficult part, I think. And that's where it comes. If you ring out, hey Todd, we need a cup of tea, or let's catch up for a yak. And I think that you talk about the angels on your side, Gloria, and I think that's what we all need. We need whatever you believe in. We just need that thing, that spiritual thing beside us, or something that can sort of give us a clip around the ears and say, hold on a minute, pal, this is where we're heading. And like Todd, you talked about that the trauma, that's never ever going to go away. But what we have to do is we've got to take the power away from it. And I believe part of that is by talking about it. It's not mine. And like Gloria says, the shame doesn't belong to any of us. And it's being able, and it's not an easy field, and we need support. And I think that's one of the things about blokes is we do find it difficult to ask for help. We do find it difficult to how we're going to move forward. What will people think of me? And like Todd said, having that cup of tea with somebody else who's and I believe that that the power of us survivors sitting with another survivor is really valuable, and it's and that's the move forward part, I think.
Yeah, nice. I think you bang on, Ken. Like it doesn't pick in, just a specific person that childhood sexual abuse is going to happen to. Like it's not fussy. It doesn't care whether you're black, white, whether you're a policeman, a lawyer, or a farm boy. Like it doesn't matter who it happens to. At the end of the day, it's nothing to do with that. And I think that's the key. That was the key for me when I figured that out. It wasn't that I'd done something wrong, like you're saying, Ken. Like you do ask yourself those questions. man, I used to beat myself up about this, and especially as a kid, and I used to think, man, I must be hopeless, like I was treated like trash, and the anger that came with that as an adult dealing with that, because you're absolutely bang on. When you're scared or traumatized or triggered, you do go back to that kid. I'm somebody that, with my trauma and PTSD, I dissociate. And my PTSD, I was reliving, so it was very real. And for me, it was like sitting up in the top corner of the ceiling, looking down on it taking place. And so that become very, very real, and very, very scary too, because I remember talking to my therapist and saying, what scares me the most is as an adult, this is happening to me, looking at what happened to me as a kid. What happens if I'm in that situation again and I react as an adult? How safe are people around me going to be? How safe is that going to be? Because that was the thing, was the anger and the hurt that came with it. And in my case, it was my birth father that, he carries the name father or dad, and he was nothing of the sort. And as a dad myself, I really struggle with that. It was like my kids meant the world to me, and how the hell could you do that to a kid? And I think for me, the moving forward part, and hopefully this helps other males out there, but the moving forward part for me, look, from being completely suicidal, not wanting to exist, really struggling with the whole thing, to moving past all of that was I'm an adult now, and I have to make adult decisions and really make those changes based on me as an adult and where I want my life to go. And I didn't want a life filled with hate and anger and fear anymore. So for me, it meant I had to stand up and say, look, this has happened to me. I don't know how the hell to move past this. I don't know where to go for help. One of those first steps was talking with Ken. But then it was actually getting some therapy. I had actually talked to the police who put me in touch with Ken anyway. But then, it was those sort of steps, and it's been a number of years. It's not a fast process at all. At one stage here, I was attending 3 therapy sessions a week, just to be able to live and function. And I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And, it's not an easy journey, but it's a journey that, when you look at it as a whole and realize, actually, you're an innocent little kid who does not deserve any of that stuff to happen to you. And you're now an adult, you're left with no choice but to deal with this. You don't have a choice but to deal with it. You've got to sometimes pull your big boy pants on and do it, and look, it absolutely is soul destroying. It breaks you. Ken, you've met me in person. I'm a big bloke. I wouldn't describe myself as being weak or anything like that at all. But for the first time in my life, at 36 years of age, I bawled my eyes out like a baby, and it wouldn't stop. It was just how it was. So sometimes we don't have those choices in life. It just, how it affects us is how it affects us, and it's about moving forward with that and realizing the real strength and mana in it. Even the mana in a person comes from turning a bad situation and making it better. And to make it better doesn't mean you make it right, because you can't make this right. I don't care how you go about it, it's never going to be right. But it's actually about just being who you are and saying, I'm actually good enough, and I matter. I matter enough to actually talk about this, because that's what we need. We need people who actually go, yep, that happened to me. I'm prepared to talk about this. I'm going to stand beside these guys. Ken is a guy I would stand beside on any fight, on any walk in regards to this. Absolutely be honoured to do that. And I know Ken would stand beside me if I stood up for it too. I guess what we're saying is we want other blokes to join us and stand up too. And we won't leave you alone. We won't leave you behind. And if you're struggling, mate, we'll be there to help you. And that goes for any survivor. It's the same. It's the same for the woman as well. And we all have to support one another in this, because the thing that unites us all is we have one thing in common, and that thing in common doesn't matter exactly how it happened in everyone's individual story, but we've all been affected by trauma of childhood sexual abuse. Yep. And that's the thing.
And 100%. And wow, what a great speaker, Todd. Thank you. I so agree with what you were saying. And I just wanted to say, you know, when you think about this, guys, I love it. We can't do it. Men, it's really challenging for men to do it alone. And it's equally, it's not as helpful for women to do it alone. And I love it. And Ken said to me months ago, Gloria, we've got to stand beside each other. So I think men and women, we each play a part. And I believe that very deeply and strongly. You know, some of the people I've had on the show recently have experienced abuse from mothers and females. And it's been my absolute pleasure to actually lay that myth out. Yes, women do abuse. Yes, mothers do abuse. And it's about time that was taken accountability for, because we've got a lot of men who have struggled with that. But I digress. My point is this. When you're a survivor, whether you're male or female, young or old, you now have a tribe. We get you. Look how comfortable the three of us are. We don't even need to explain anything, because we know what dissociation, we know what hypervigilance is, we know what being triggered is, we know what waking up with nightmares feels like. We know that when we look at our feet and our hands, yes, we're adults, but when we're reliving this, we feel small again. So I guess from my perspective, beautiful audience out there, we see you, we believe you, we stand beside you, and it's just time for New Zealand actually to step up and for this to be given a lot more in the way of a platform. One tip I just want to give to our survivors is this: if you're being triggered or if the memories are coming, just simply look at your hands and feet. And even Ken and Todd, if we do this now, these are adult hands and these are adult feet. So I'm grounded in my body. I'm an adult. I'm remembering, but I'm actually okay. I'm okay. Because I think simple things like that can be.
I think the important thing is too, what we need, it's the little boy that got us to the place we're at now with little boy skills. And so now it's about us as adults to acknowledge and thank that little boy, you know, to getting us to where he did without any, you know, I mean, we talk about soldiers with PTSD. Those are trained men who went away to kill. And whereas we weren't trained at anything except to survive, and we survived with that little boy brain. And Todd, you brought it up before in relation to anger. The sad part about it, when we get angry, we've never been told that that's an emotion and we're allowed to actually get angry for what happened to us. But we get angry and we take it out on people who we love and who are close to us, who are getting the results of what happened to us, because no one's ever taught us how to deal with that emotional side. And Todd's right, I am small compared to him. He's a giant. But I had to spend my whole life proving that I was tough and staunch. And so I go and put myself in a boxing ring. You know, I mean, one of the most dangerous things you can bloody do, but it was to prove, not to me, but it was to prove to everybody else that I was tough and don't come near me because I've been hurt, and if you come near me, I'm going to hurt you. So there's because there was nobody there to help me with that emotional damage that had been done. And that's the part I think that people can't understand is, yes, the sexual violation was horrendous. However, the psychological damage that was done with those acts is the stuff that really takes control of who we are. And if we can't understand that, then we're not going to change. So yeah, that psychological stuff is huge.
Oh, it is. You know, look, I suffered physical damage as well as the mental damage that come along with it, I suppose. And as an adult, some of that physical stuff still affects me to this day, and it will for the rest of my life. But it is definitely the emotional and mental baggage that sticks around. That's the part that you've actually got to put the work and effort into to being able to move forward, I guess. And Gloria, you touched on before about that guys can be offended against by women. And I shared that a little bit in our very first interview. You know, I was abused by multiple people, including a woman as well. And hence my trust with all people sort of gone, to be fair. But it's something that I'm working on, and I'm proud of the fact that I'm willing to give that a go and take people for face value a bit more now, because I'm looking at them from an adult version, not a kid version anymore, which has made a huge difference. And Ken, you're right, like the kids, as kids, we made it through, we learned survival skills. We absolutely had to learn survival skills. We wouldn't have got to where we've got. And you know what? The thing that I'm most proud of is the fact that it made me resilient. That is probably the one thing that I take out of all of that is I become resilient, not any credit to them at all. It was the fact that I had the will and the strength to learn the skills to cope with that and to survive all that and to get to where I am now. And now I turn my hypervigilance, as you said, Gloria, and that is probably what my boss would deem as one of my biggest strengths with my job, is I see everything. I don't miss the ball when it comes to that, you know. My wife often jokes I'm neighbourhood watch because I see what goes on around the place that other people don't even pay any attention to. But I do, you know, and it's those things that they come in quite a nasty, from a nasty place, I guess, but you can actually use them for really good, and you've just got to run with it, really. But yeah, look, just support one another, you know, be there, listen, just listen to what each other has to say, I guess, and just be mindful that everyone's in different places and different stages, you know, like someone who's just at that point of wanting to talk isn't going to have the strength to talk like someone like Ken, who's done this for years. But I guarantee you there's times that Ken's just like me and struggles with the emotional side of it at times because he's been triggered as well. And just like yourself, Gloria, you know, you've been through hell and back, and there's times that that gets you down, you know. It's just how it is for all of us.
And 100%. And I love what you're saying, because, you know, it doesn't matter, and this is for our beautiful survivors out there, it doesn't matter whether you're new at this and memories have surfaced or whether you've been going a long, long time. When you're triggered, it's like we're right back there. And I guess what these guys are saying and what Todd is saying is, you know, in a way, it's not a competition. Just whatever you feel and wherever you're at is perfect. You got a tribe of people who believe you and support you. And in the show notes, I will put details for Todd and Ken, you know, talk to you guys after the show. But one thing I do want to talk about, and Ken, you mentioned it. So just here's a useful fact, team. The greatest percentage, over 70% of PTSD sufferers, people were forgiven for thinking were Vietnam vets or war veterans. Wrong. It's people like us who have experienced childhood trauma and usually linked to child sexual abuse. So that's fact number one.
Mm.
The other interesting thing about that is war vets were allowed to have blocked memories and have memories surface and be triggered and traumatized and respond, all completely funded, supported, believed by government, put on pedestals for what they went through. Do you see where I'm heading with this?
Yeah, exactly.
As survivors, we're not allowed to have repressed memories. We're not allowed to say, I blocked it until.
Yeah.
We're not put on pedestals and given any of that same support. So my question to you two fabulous men is, what's wrong with this picture?
Well, I think it's an education thing again. I mean, I took over the years taken a lot of men to psych emergency here in Christchurch, and who have, just attempted to take their own lives, and we've managed to get them to psych emergency. And the people at the hospital have said, "Oh, so what brought you here?" And they said, "Oh, when I was 9, I was sexually abused by." Oh, no. What brought you here now? We're not interested in what happened to you in the past. What got you to here today? And so that just completely shut the guys down. And then I was watching just after the earthquakes here in Christchurch, and there was a psychiatrist on the TV, and someone says to her, "What's the most important thing to do?" And they said, "Well, for everybody, their traumas will be different, even though the event's similar. However, the most important thing they can do is talk about it." And yet, for a survivor of sexual abuse, we're told not to talk about it. You'll re-traumatize yourself. So I really struggled with that over time, trying to work out. The medical system, I think, has been an issue for us as survivors. The ACC, of course, is a medical insurance model, which doesn't work very well for survivors. And we've got to get back to, and I think I look on it, I believe Indigenous healing. If you look at in Indigenous healing or working with Indigenous people, I'm not Ken Clearwater. I'm Ken Clearwater, whose family come from here, and this happened, blah blah blah. So you get your whanaungatanga your whole life about what you're not just Ken Clearwater, the butcher or the baker and the candlestick maker. And I think it's the same for us as survivors. We need to be able to say, this is where I've come from. This is what happened to me. I need help to get through that. I need the right people to help me to get through it. So it comes down to that education. And we're not freaks. We're pretty
amazing, aren't we?
I think we're more than amazing, Gloria.
Wow. Look what we've been through. And as you said earlier, and I think you added to it as well, Todd, we were children when this happened. We had no training for this. We just had to survive. We went into the trauma responses. You know, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn is the fourth one now. And we can all relate, you know, and that complex post-traumatic stress. Todd, you'd mentioned to me in our first interview that, you know, that's a huge part of existence, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And look, I mean, I think part of the big issue that we face within the community and government agencies and things is, you know, I'm loath to say it, but I think a big part of it stems back from, for years and years, what's been going on with the Catholic, you know, schools and things like that, church and stuff, where they've covered up a lot of this. People haven't been believed. But then not only that, there's boys' homes and foster care and stuff like that, where a lot of this abuse has happened to young people. And in some ways, I guess that puts the government as being liable, the same as ACC. It's still funded through the government as well. So you are going to bang your heads against the wall in some degree with that stuff. But then there's the other side, you know, like Ken, you were saying about the crisis team, and I absolutely know what you're saying there. I had quite a few dealings with the Christchurch crisis team. They didn't want to know about the sexual abuse stuff at all. They weren't interested in that. I did find them really good in understanding about actually what's happening to me at the moment is I'm just completely overwhelmed, and this is too much for one guy to take on by himself. But it doesn't change the fact that actually this is all caused because of this, and I need help with that. And if I get the help for that, then I'm not going to be suicidal the same way, you know. But that went way above their heads, I think, and I think, Ken, you nailed that. But I do think at the end of the day, I think it's just going to come down to people actually just bearing in mind that this is absolutely real. This does happen to people from all walks of life, and be compassionate. And the more we talk about it, the more they can't hide this, that it happens, and it's happened to their brothers and family members too. It's happened to their sisters or their daughters, you know, and it does happen. And I guess that's the thing, is we believe, because we've been through it. A lot of people who have never experienced it for themselves, they struggle with that. They struggle with, how can that happen? You know, I came from such an awesome life. My mum and dad and aunties and uncles all were really supportive and cared about me, because they haven't seen that side. And for people to relate sometimes is a lot harder.
Yeah. I agree with you.
I guess that's kind of where I'd see it.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think too, and Ken and I have talked about this in the past, you look at Gloria Vale, unfortunately it's got part of my name in it. It's a well-known secret that child sexual abuse is in there. It's carrying on today. It's been a well-known thing since time began. Guess what? They're more interested in a WorkSafe event that gets the national eye on it than these poor, beautiful children. We don't even know how many, but it will be endemic. Get the children out.
And it's interesting you could say that, Gloria, because that's the first thing I put on Facebook when that come out with it. They've got 60 known offences that happened within that place, and then all of a sudden the companies are pulling out because of the WorkSafe. Not one company offered to pull out when those children were getting sexually abused. So that's the issue, what we're facing as a society. The money is far more valuable for their reputation than it is for what happened to those children. And like Todd said, the church is the same. They're not sorry about what happened. They're sorry they've been caught, that it's given the church a bad name. So once again, it's come back, whereas there's no value put on those children whatsoever, and it's disgraceful.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And so these are powerful people, guys. We need to face into this. These are decision makers. They're at our highest levels in our government, across society. And what? Child sexual abuse. Oh, there's another one.
Yeah.
Look away.
Yeah. We're and I think, like Todd talked about it before, people don't want to believe that it happens. So therefore, if they don't know about it, it doesn't exist. And here you've got us three, we're coming out into the open, and people don't, I wish they wouldn't speak so loud. Yeah. And, you know, it's just bizarre. It does my head in.
I get people saying to me, do you have to speak about it? And I go, I'll never stop speaking about it, because it could be your child or grandchild I save. Yeah. I will never stop speaking about it. And Todd, I know you're really passionate about this as well. You're never going to stop, are you, buddy?
Look, mate, I guess as a kid, my voice was taken away. And I didn't have the words. I didn't know how to say what was going on. And as an adult, I found my voice. I'm not going to shut up. I don't care what walk of life you're from. I'm going to tell it to your face. I'll tell it straight. I don't care. I'm not a man that minces my words. I'm pretty straight up, and I'll call an ace, a spade, a spade. And look, I even entered the Farm Manager of the Year competition here in Canterbury, which is a nationwide competition. And I spoke about it there too, because to me, any realm at all that I can talk about this is a good thing. And it's interesting watching growing blokes sort of go a bit green around the gills about, oh, he's actually going there and I actually went there, you know. And but the reality is I think when they see you stand up and use your voice and you do talk about this, anyone that's genuine sort of a person is going to go, wow, you know, this is actually real. This really did happen. And look, he's a normal guy, you know. It doesn't mean you're not. It doesn't mean that you're any different than them. But we are way better because we have the skills to actually say, you know what, we survived this. And you're looking at us like we're the crazy ones. You know, I just think at the end of the day, we've just got to talk about it. And, you know, it's, yeah, I'm not going to shut up about it. That's just what I need to do.
I think you talk about walks of life too, and I always use an example when I'm doing presentations of a group that I was, you know, when I was running the peer support groups back in the 90s, and there was one particular, I was really exhausted, and I got to the group, and it was, and I suddenly looked around, and there was a teacher, a truck driver, a police officer, quite a high-ranking police officer, a guy who had just got out of prison. There was a mongrel mob guy there. There was someone out, and then next to, and there was also a black power guy and a white. You know, so, and I'm looking around the room and I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty. For me, that's when it really clicked. The importance of, it's not about the mask that you're wearing, which is like being a patched gang member or being a police officer. It was about all these men, and I think there was 8 or 9 of us in the room from, like I say, from all different walks of life, and we were there for one specific reason, and our lives have been traumatized by an act of sexual violence. And for the police officer, it got to him, and he started crying, and it was like what he'd done is he'd been working that week on a case where a young girl had been sexually abused, and she was like 6 or 7 years old, and he broke down because he was 6 or 7 when it happened to him, so he was taken straight back. The guy who had been out of prison only a few days, he went and picked up the tissues, handed them to the police officer, touched him on the shoulder and said, "We're here to support you, mate." And that was, you know, and then it was pouring down with rain. We were in a building in Hereford Street, and the mongrel mob guy was walking out the door, and the white power guy was walking out the door, and the mongrel mob fella said, "Where are you off to, mate?" He said, "I'm heading home." He said, "How are you travelling?" He says, "I'm walking." He says, "Not in this rain." And he took him home, and the next week the white power guy brought the mongrel mob guy to the group. So for me, it just all clicked into place at that moment in time that what we were doing was the most simplest thing you can possibly do, is have 8 to 10 men sitting in a room being able to share the emotional damage that had happened to them, and bang. And I still see most of those guys, or hear from them to this day, and it was just so powerful for me. And it goes right back to the beginning where we started, Gloria. Men need to talk about this stuff. We need to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting because it in no way are we diminishing at all, you know, what adult women survivors go through. That's not what this is at all. I guess I have a heart for all our survivors here, and I'm just aware, I feel a bit bad that I'm unable to represent the men who have struggled, because there's such a wall of silence, and it's really hard for them. And you know, you guys coming on the show and being prepared to speak is hopefully going to offer them a beacon of light, because we've got a lot of people suffering out there, and we also have gatekeepers around making sure this never sees the light of day or changes, actually. you know, guys, it takes me back to early or mid-late 90s and early 2000s when we had the highest male youth and young men suicide rate in the world, and it was swept under the carpet. And I'm sorry, but it just feels like this is as well. And, you know, I don't know whether we've got people who are part of these pedophile rings who are so powerful, they stop things. I can't get on any media channels here in New Zealand. The UK and the States, very keen, get lots of interviews all the time. No one in New Zealand wants to know. And I think they get stopped at the top.
Yeah, look, the media is what we need, and that's what I said about having a national. And I know myself, I get called up when it suits the media.
Yes.
You know, if they want a statement from me, they'll call me and I'll make that statement. And especially if it's something controversial that they want to say but they can't, and I'll say it for them. And so that's right. But when we need it, and it's not a two-way thing. And I'm like you, Gloria. I mean, I was on Al Jazeera News back in 2013, and that stuff goes all around the world, but not in New Zealand.
Not in New Zealand.
I must say one thing I did. I got interviewed by Jack Tame on the Breakfast Show a couple of years ago, and he was absolutely brilliant. He he never jumped in. He asked a question, let me answer that question, and then and he was brilliant. But those things only happen once or twice a year, whereas it should be on a more regular basis. Not necessarily me talking, but other survivors talking.
Yeah, well, I had Sunday wanted to do a program, so obviously I'd taken mine through police, and but they wanted to do the program on the whole court process and being caught and all that. And interestingly enough, the police aren't interested in that. They don't want that being there at all. And see, I was actually a bit different than a lot of people. In the court process as well, is I actually put in an application to have name suppression removed from my father, which meant I also wanted name suppression removed from me, because as a complainant, you automatically of childhood sexual abuse, you automatically get name suppression. But that meant then I couldn't talk about it. Unfortunately, Sunday weren't very understanding of the fact that actually this is quite an emotional journey, and I don't know that I really want a camera in my face, and I don't know that they would have liked what they got told at the time. So I was trying to be good to them as well, because they would have had to bleep out a lot of things, I think. But at the same token, I kind of regret not doing it, because that might have opened that door. But again, I still don't get why they can't do that same story without that part in it. You know, they don't need that in there. The result was there. At the end of the day, again, my hands were tied too, because a lot of people don't realise this, but if the accused wants to make a plea deal, you don't get a lot of say in that,
No.
because the police prosecutor will either accept it or they won't. I was prepared to go to trial, but they didn't want to do that because it's too traumatic, and it's this and it's that. And it's like, actually, you've got a guy who's sitting here saying, I will take this all the way, let's go. But yeah, I think that is probably the thing that hamstrings us the most, is the media don't want to know about it. They don't want to talk about it. And again, if you look at the media in New Zealand, it is owned by your government. So where do you think the problem lies?
Yeah, I agree. My book got given to Mariana Carmo, and she quite liked what she saw. But again, we're looking at, and Ken, you'll know this, TVNZ.
She's a beautiful woman too. She's just an amazing woman.
Yeah.
It's at the top. It's not the
it's not the presenters, no.
Yeah.
No, but my question back is, ask yourselves why. We need to start asking these questions.
Well, I think,
Why?
look, with the uptake of the internet and stuff like that too, there's a lot of these, like you said before, about pedophile rings and things like that. There's a lot of very, very high-profile people that participate in that sort of thing.
Yep.
So now it's more widespread than just being in our homes and in our safe places, because the reality is, for most children of childhood sexual abuse, the offender's known to them. And it's generally a close family member or friend. So that kind of narrows that part down for us in New Zealand, I guess, is these people are the ones closest to us. But I'll ask you a question in response to your question, Gloria. Do you know what Ken looks when he's on the internet, or would you know what your brother or whatever was getting into? We don't. That's the reality. You don't know who it is that's doing these things and partaking in these. So we could have head of police that's partaking in that. We wouldn't know. We could have government officials. We wouldn't know.
That's right. But I just want to, as you guys do, I just want to save our children, and help our survivors. That's it's got to stop, and we need to normalize these conversations. So I'm going to ask you while we're live, could we maybe do this once a month, guys? Can we get back on this? Let's keep this going, because I think we've got to get the word out. We've got to get support out there. We've got to get some education going. Anything we can do, because we know the pain of this. We know the average age for people to disclose is 52. You carry this for that long?
Well, I'd like to put a bit of a challenge out there to anyone who's watching this to actually comment on this video and, put your thoughts and stuff on there. If you've got reasonings why you don't want to come out publicly and talk about this stuff, let us know.
Next time we'll do a live stream and we'll actually get Q&A comments.
So, someone who, if you've got ideas, let us know.
Perfect.
Awesome.
All right. Hey, any last words from either of you?
Just thanks, and like we spoke about earlier on, Gloria, I mean, I do a lot of work with Louise Nicholas, and I'm a great believer that we have to be working side by side. And I've met some incredible Māori wahine that I've worked with over the years too, who have been really, really good supporters of my work. So it's the only way we can change it, is by walking side by side. And we'll do it. We'll get there. So it's a journey.
Thank you.
Go the Crusaders.
So look, just let me close out with our audience team. Don't go anywhere just yet. So to our beautiful survivors, I hope you've got as much from this as I have tonight, and very grateful to you for watching. Please know these fabulous men sitting with me have nothing but love in their hearts and support for all of you out there. You're never alone. So as with all of this, lots of love to you. Take care of your wonderful selves. We see you, we support you, we believe you. Reach out.